Member of the Univision HR team and a member of the C2HR Board of Directors. Thank you for participating in today's webinar, Rethinking Workspace Design and Logistics. Today's webinar is the fourth in the C2HR's Reentry Journey series, and we look forward to announcing more webinars as our membership community continues navigating through these very unique times. In addition, I'd like to invite you to explore the C2HR Knowledge Center on our website. It contains a curated collection of timely articles and resources on many topics, including COVID-19. I feel like the more we share, the more we will all learn together and get through this quickly. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to thank the C2HR Champion sponsors who made this free webinar possible. Thank you to the Cable Center and Charter Communications. Today, we have four experts who will share their insight on the timely topic of rethinking workspaces as we all focus on our reentry to the workplace. Leslie Mulcahy with Charter Communications, Krista Sinker from Comcast, Heather Turner, Loth, and Kitty Yuen from EUA. Thank you for your attention, and I'll now turn it over to Heather to kick off the discussion.
Thank you so much for having us. Can everybody hear me okay? Just get a quick nod. Yes, okay, good. Thank you for having us, and those of you who are joining in today's webinar, thank you for taking the time out of your day. As we look forward to returning back to the office, that roadmap can really look daunting. For me personally, being a part of building that roadmap here at EUA and also assisting some of our clients with theirs, I can tell you each one of them are slightly different and custom to that of their own individual organizations. There certainly isn't a one-size-fits-all. But with the health and safety of our employees front and center, I believe that that foundational element aligned with your people, place, and technology can guide each of us in our plans. Our goal today is to share with you some of the ways that we've developed our roadmaps for a return back, and hope that we can provide some tips and tricks, maybe some ideas as you engage in yours. So just to start off, I was reading an article last night that McKinsey put out. It was called Crushing Coronavirus Uncertainty, the Big Unlock for Our Economies. And it talked about the link between the uncertainty and the economy. The greater the uncertainty, the more negative impact on the economy. And it stated at the end of the article, communicating clearly to citizens and employees about actions, timelines, and expected outcomes is a critical factor in gaining consumer confidence. The more factual and forward-looking our messages are, the faster confidence will return and the faster an economic recovery can begin. I think the same could be true for that return to our own businesses, and the plans that we have in place and the way that we communicate those can really be key. So as we start to dive in here, Krista, I guess I'm interested to hear, how are you developing that building model, and who returns, who doesn't return? How are you going about that?
Hi, Heather. It's been a journey. So as we're starting to reimagine everything, this started about 2 months ago. I am in Philadelphia, so our headquarters campus, it's about 3 million square feet, and it's all high rises, so we have our set of challenges. We basically started looking at a couple different things. We, of course, had to look to the people, and I think we could go to the next slide. We needed to look at what tools do we have in place for the people who are virtual currently, and then socially, what do we look for? So we started with bucketing our personnel into 3 different buckets. We have about 10,000 people on our campus. The first is building essentials. So our buildings never really shut down because we're considered an essential business. There's right now about 1% of our population, about 100 people, plus or minus, that currently go into the 5 buildings that we have on campus. Right now, we're looking at ramping up to a 5% model, which will be our pilot. We're calling that identifying the office optimal individuals. And that basically is folks that are currently virtual, but they could be more productive, tethered to anchors within our buildings that relate to testing, production, rack systems that support the globe right now. So we are almost at that point where the 5% of those individuals are going to be identified. And coupled with that, we're going to have to just focus on that for now. Simultaneously, though, we have another team working on a proactive approach, and that's going to be what do we need to tweak based on the 5% model? So those folks that start to come in, entryway logistics, vertical transportation, that's a very big deal. It's a very hot topic right now. Mass transportation, how do we get people into the city? I'm sure those of you are in big cities. That's not really worked out yet. I'm sure you hear Cuomo talking about New York. You know, we're getting to that point, but these are all the different things that kind of have to be identified. Communications is huge. We are right now looking at pro-size ad car model, which is something that a lot of change management professionals utilize. So that's kind of where we are. And it's actually been pretty smooth. I think in Philadelphia, Comcast is ahead of the curve from a planning perspective. And we don't have a time to go back yet, but we're getting there. So if you go to the next slide, I can kind of talk about the three different categories. So before COVID, you know, with Comcast in the culture, most people went into the office. There was not a big call for flexible workspace. We didn't have that kind of, you can work from home, virtual, that didn't really happen. So we're now in this virtual experiment. It's been pretty successful. We'd say that most of the desks were assigned. We had a couple of hoteling areas, which is for the people that were mobile, and they would come in to collaborate or innovate, and they would sit someplace for the day. With this pilot, we're thinking right now that when we ramp up, you're going to probably have to have a workplace reservation. So we're looking into tools right now that can help us with that, and that's for a couple different reasons. It helps with janitorial, so what are the cleaning protocols once people leave? And then eventually we're hoping to make it robust so that we can support a contact tracing element to that. So those are the types of things. We have a campus app. We're hoping we can actually implement these types of things within the campus app.
You have essential areas that you're looking at, Krista?
Essential areas, how so?
Specific on how maybe you're preparing the building. I think looking ahead to that next slide, you're starting to outline some of those things?
Yes, we are. We're starting to look at different community spaces, how we're going to basically tackle the entryway.
Okay.
I go in every 10 days and we have thermal scanning that happens in the lobby. You then have to go and stand. We have designated markers within the lobby. You then have to make sure your name is on a list. Then you badge in, and then you have to make sure you're the only one on the elevator going to the floors that you need to go to. I can imagine as we ramp up, we're really honing in on those protocols and policies right now because it's going to get more congested, and we're looking to see where we can potentially have bottlenecks. Our HR business units are doing a great job communicating with all of the different folks, letting them know kind of what we're working on. We have created, and there's a couple slides that follow that can show you what we're looking at from a community space occupancy model that puts in social distancing. We're looking at reducing touch points. So there's little fobs and keys that we're looking at right now to give people in a welcome packet. And we can talk about that more later. And then again, communication is essential to the whole entire model. Without effective communication and explaining to people why, we don't think that the etiquette is going to be driven as hard. We need people to kind of be adults about things. We don't want to have to police them. It's actually a word we're trying to avoid. But we're just trying to see signage and emails and basically telling everybody what to do. That's the biggest part of this.
Yeah, and if we have to slide 11 and maybe even get a quick look at 12, that the more visual that we can be, I think, with employees, the more helpful.
Yes.
Krista, can you just hit on this visual mapping? Is this something that's in the hands of the employees right now, or how do you plan on handling that?
So we're not there yet. Once we get the office optimal model, what we're going to do, we need to look at distribution of personnel across the campus. So a couple things. We have 5 buildings, 2 of them are owned, 3 of them are leased. So we know for the 5%, people are more comfortable in coming back into a Comcast owned building. So we're focusing on that. Next, we need to look at the vertical distribution and how that goes to the elevator banks within the owned buildings. And there's about 4 or 5 per building. Once we get there, once we figure out what floors, when we look at that distribution, we'll put up graphics and signage highlighting potentially intersection areas that could be high risk. which way do you walk on the floor? It's not going to be run to the bathroom and run back the same way you came, or run to the pantry.
Huge behavior shift.
Behavior shift, enormous behavior shift.
Yeah.
So these will be on the floors, and we're hoping we can also send them to the individuals before, when they're identified, before they go onto their floor.
So maybe we'll transition a little bit to those comfort measures and the steps that we're taking to make people feel okay to come back. And maybe Leslie, you could talk a little bit about what that might look like at your organization.
So what we're looking at, and much to what Krista referenced, is we're trying to basically just make sure when people do come back to the office, and as Comcast is doing, we haven't quite gotten to that point. We obviously have the essential personnel on site now, the facilities groups and the leadership groups. But in terms of bringing the staff back, we want to make sure that we are very visual, very vigilant about making sure that they see what our cleaning protocols are, that there are staff in there on a regular basis throughout the day, cleaning the high touch spots, and being aware of the higher traffic areas, the break rooms, the restrooms, and just making sure that everything is kept spotless. So I think it's going to be very much of a visual thing that we have to do. We have to keep up with, so that people see exactly what you're doing. And also communication is key. We need to let our employees know regularly on a daily basis that what exactly we are doing for protocols and processes, and just making sure that they understand what is happening on a daily basis. We are providing the PPE, gloves, masks, hand sanitizer, hand wipes or sanitizing wipes, so that they hopefully will clean up their own work areas after themselves. We really are going to rely on our employees to help manage this through the process, because it will be a lengthy process that we go through.
Thank you, Leslie. Krista, do you have anything to add, and maybe even on like the mental well-being, excuse me, of your employees at Comcast?
Sure, it's a very big consideration. Communication eases some of that. We're looking right now with our procurement and supply chain leads to create some packets for them. Again, by the bucket, it'll be people that come into the office, but what can we do for the people that are virtually permanent, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do we do for them? There's a lot of well-being coaching and counseling that Comcast offers. I'm sure a lot of your companies do that right now. Very important. With my team in particular, I'm trying to make sure that they're not working more than the 8-hour day. When we're home, we wind up losing track of time. We're working 12, 15 hours a day. We're trying to create some virtual support from a happy hour perspective. I know a couple companies are doing those types of things. And then I encourage people, and our HR team is encouraging people to check in on those that you may not hear from. There's people that are vocal on Teams meetings or Zoom meetings. Then there's people that kind of, to no fault of their own, it's just because they're quiet, they become seen in the background. So we're kind of helping people that may be a quieter personality kind of step up and encourage those conversations.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was on a webinar yesterday, and just even reframing the question of "Are you okay?" or "How are you doing?" to "What do you need?" might be kind of that avenue into that. You know, as we pivot maybe even to the physical environment, Kitty, I'm going to look to you to maybe help with this question. What are the things that even in our own offices we can do to help kind of prepare for more of that safer work environment for our employees? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're looking at a few things in our office. Obviously, we've got a lot of staff coming in, and we're a very highly collaborative environment. So right now it's hard for our group, but we are making way, we are working with different different, we're looking at different ways to work, right? We're using Zoom to, we're using Teams right now actually to do some meetings. We've done some virtual collaboration with it. We're trying the idea flip to throw ideas out. We're doing a lot of kind of sketches and taking pictures of that. But right now we're not using our conference rooms. Those are blocked off. We have sanitizing stations at the ends of all our areas. We do have protocols right now where someone actually has to sign in. That's the important part, is to let HR know which teams are coming in. We're so, you know, we could have one team come in and it could be 8 people, right? And so we want to make sure we disperse everyone. So the density is very important. We have workstations that are kind of separated, but we are looking at how we stagger the work, right? So not everybody's sitting directly across from each other, because that's kind of how we sit right now. It's a modified benching. So we are trying to stagger the benching so that not everyone's looking directly at each other. We have communal work tables right behind us also. So that zone right now is kind of clutter free, and keeping it that way so that we're very smart about where the staff has to come in and clean. The slide that we have right now, like you said, I think a lot of the attendees right now are in that what's called essential critical infrastructure workers, the communications, IT groups. We're in the forefront, and I believe this group right now is leading the efforts in establishing protocols and talking about the important things that are going to be the model, I think, for other firms that come online. Obviously, restaurants are totally different, but as far as looking at workplace, I feel like because companies like Comcast and Charter still have to maintain the very important part of connectivity that most of us are using, that we need to, we're probably going to be the ones that a lot of people look at. Transitioning to the next slide, I want to talk about some physical things. People are still, these are charts from Gallup polls, and they end May 3rd, which is a couple weeks lagging, or 1 week lagging from where we are right now. But what we're learning from the Gallup polls, that people are incrementally shifting their attitudes about coming back. So the first chart on top, you'll see there the impression about, is it getting better? Is it staying the same? The good news is that it's trending up higher. However, it is very incremental. As you could see, the past 3 weeks, it moves up 2 points, it goes up 1, it goes back down. But what we're hearing is that it is incrementally getting better. Second chart on the bottom, it's about people staying at home and what are their feelings about that. So you could see that we're still at least 70% and above in that range where people are staying home and want to work from home. But that's the now, and we're transitioning a couple. There's one more slide after this one that talks about the feelings. It's also another Gallup poll. You could see that the statistics all the way through, this had started in March, beginning of March until May 3rd. You could see about 50% feeling like it's in a few more months before we really get back to normal. And it's starting to still trend about 30-some%, but it is the bulk of what people believe is that we're in this for a few more months. The next slide I want to talk about is what you can do now. And I think we want to frame this in the now, near, and far categories. The now category, a lot of what facilities, HR, and architects are doing to help their clients is talking about retrofit, right? We're really trying to see what we have right now and what we can do. So retrofitting, like Chris had mentioned, we're reducing densities. We're thinking about shift staggering for people. Physically speaking, we're also talking about adding divisions. There are a lot of furniture manufacturers out there that can offer up panels, and there's a multitude of panels. They could be, I heard something about PET panels, and we're looking into that because the PET is a post-consumer type felt. It is antimicrobial because it is made of wool materials that they're looking into. But you have probably gone out, if you've gone to the grocery store and seen some plexiglass. There's plexiglass everywhere. And so plexiglass screens are also another option for people to look at. And there are other, like I said, there's felt, there's plexiglass, there's still some fabric panels. that are being retrofitted into existing workplace that you can use. As Krista mentioned and Leslie mentioned, that wayfinding and visual cues is so important right now. And that has a lot to do with defining how you move through the space. So we're talking to clients about opportunities to add not just the stickies that you buy online that you stick on your floor, but adding your own brand to it, because that's also very important. The cognitive or the mental state of people coming back in, they want to be proud of where they work. So you may want to think about adding your brand colors, adding a little bit more customization to that signage to help people feel like they're more at home. The last thing that Krista had mentioned too is hoteling and free address. Workers really want to have choices in where they work, right? Even the 1% or the 5% coming back right now, they really need to feel comfortable where they are. It is more for a facilities point of view and real estate point of view, easier to capture an area where you know exactly where they're sitting. So maybe if you cordon off a zone right now in your area, you don't let everybody return back to their desk, but you may have a couple areas where workers can feel like they can sit, but you can, in a sense, assign a place or find out where they want to work, but assign that so it's taken. And you know that that person may be there for a couple of days or weeks. I mean, it's coming in daily where you check in, but if they feel comfortable working on that spot for the full week, or you have to just kind of track patterns of what people want to do, you can't always say that they have to work in the same space all the time. You know, the next time they come in or next day they come in, it may be another work setting that they really want to do. So you need to offer up a couple of them. One more thing that people are looking at doing in retrofitting is appliances, you know, and we'll talk about that later on, but we really need to, right now we're only focusing on working areas, workstation areas.
Thanks, Kitty. And this really reminds me again of that article about gaining consumer confidence. And again, the more that we can communicate, the more visual cues that we can give to employees, and even giving them options to even retrofit, whether it's a panel that they can put on themselves, just because that helps them make them feel more comfortable, I think is key and will really help gain that momentum coming back. So as we transition, and I'm looking at slide 19 here for the folks in the background, just wanted to kind of maybe look forward to more of the news or the near. We were kind of focused more on like what's going on right now, but in the near future, you talked about phases and the various approaches. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that next phase and how we're looking to further engage, increase engagement amongst those teams, promoting the corporate culture. And so Krista and Leslie, maybe I want to kind of tag team. Krista, maybe we'll have you start off since we're in the virtual, we can't see body cues as well. But what percentage of your workforce historically worked remote? Do you see this shifting? And if so, how?
Yeah, and I'm sure that Leslie will agree. I think she has the same type of culture. The culture did not encourage flexible work. So, and there's a good reason for that. In technology, innovation happens with disruption, right? You see people in the hallway, that's where the ideas come. And that's what we were there to support. We're there to support that. We have found, though, that with this experiment that we're all in, people are still innovating and they're still being productive, most people. I think that, again, there's going to be a big question, speaking to this slide, people are going to need to ask themselves, but do I really need to go to work? It may take, your commute time may be added on by an hour, just with all the protocols that need to be followed. So I think people are really, and leaders are really going to start to ask those questions. And again, if you're tethered to something that could make you more productive, it makes sense. If you are productive at home and your team is thriving, and I think those are the things that are now going to be looked at moving forward.
And just adding on to what Krista has said, Charter's culture is very much the same. Historically, they have not had people working remotely or working from home. And so this is all new to them. But the statistics have shown that productivity levels have remained high, people are productive. But just by virtue of personality, there are people who love the idea of working at home, and they are more productive. There are also people that it is too much of a disruption. It's too easy to get up and, go out and work in the yard or go do your laundry. And so it's a difficult transition for some people. But overall, I think by virtue of just out of necessity, we are going to have to relook at that policy and really work with individual employees and business units to see what makes sense from each individual and business unit's perception, or so that we can pull together the people that really need to be in the office first, and then look at those who would prefer to be in the office. But there's a really fine line. I mean, we have to look at the maximum number of people we can allow and keep the social distance, and make sure that people are comfortable with the numbers of employees that are coming in. But I do think this has been a great eye-opener for Charter, in that, it's shown them that people can continue to be productive and working from home or working remotely. And it's been a great transition and educational point for us.
And
That's interesting.
to add on, I'm sorry, to add on to Leslie, that, there's also, people may opt out if they're deemed essential only because right now the schools are closed in most of the country, and the elder care. So there's people that are taking care of their parents and they don't want to put them at risk, or people who have immunocompromised family members. So those types of things really need to be looked at that individual level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I recently, Krista, I know you were a part of the CoreNet Global Hackathon, it's an industry specific for the real estate community. But we really looked at, in our specific team, kind of distributed work and what that future work model might look like. And I think for this audience, it's interesting to think about the budget. So even though maybe real estate could decrease over time, things that hit this group's budgets might increase. So thinking through like change management, or how are we bringing employees together on an annual basis? Things like distributed workstations, how are we supporting those individuals at homes? And that's probably more of a long-term solution, but it's just, again, an interesting kind of balance of the budget to be thinking about as well. Think about this concept.
I think OpEx is definitely going to go up.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's something we really need to look at too, is with so many people working at home, we've had a lot of requests for us to provide support and equipment for them at home. Many obviously took their laptops and some took their monitors, but once they've been there, now that they've been there for a couple of months, I think they're looking at the ergonomics of working at home. And so we are getting a lot of questions about that. And it's something we are going to have to look at if we move more towards that remote work policy.
Sure. In terms of the telecommunications industry, and collaboration is such a cornerstone of high-performing, high-functioning teams. How do you see kind of those teams operating together in more of this dispersed, some people might be dispersed, some people might be at the office. How do you see that kind of working, and what might change, and are there things that might still stay the same? And I'll direct this to Krista.
Okay. It's a great question, Heather. There's a lot of fortune telling going on, and that's why we're going to that 5% to pilot it.
Okay.
There are concerns from senior leaders right now. They want the whole team back or the whole team remote. When you start to break it up into those who can come in, how do you do that, right? Why are you coming in? Are you still going to be on a Teams call? You're probably not going to be using the conference rooms to the full capability in that beginning stage. So what does that look like, and what does that mean? And I think that's why the pilot model is so important, so that we don't ramp up to 25% or 50% with those still to be unknown. I do know that our leadership has expressed concern over that topic.
Sure.
From Charter's,
go ahead.
Yes, from Charter's perspective, I think, we are a communications company. We are a technology company. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to show that we can collaborate from afar. We've got the technology to do that. We have WebEx, we have Microsoft Teams, we've got Zoom. There are so many avenues that we can utilize, and even before all of this started, Charter was making a lot of forward motion in really ramping up on all of these options, just even within the office, so that people didn't necessarily need to go to a meeting in a conference room. They could meet from their desk. And so to me, this is and I think Charter's view is that this is a great opportunity for us to really utilize the technology that is out there and make it available and easy and effective for our employees to be able to collaborate. That doesn't say, that's not to say that in-person collaboration isn't necessary, because it absolutely is. And there's that social aspect that plays a huge part as well. But we do have the technology to make it effective for people to collaborate from afar.
Sure. So I want to kind of jump off of some things that Kitty, you had mentioned in terms of like temporary closures or even restrictions. And as we think kind of more of that near term and more employees kind of being reintroduced back into this new work environment, are there any restrictions that either Krista at Comcast or Leslie at Charter, you guys are specifically making?
Yes. So we have a cafe that is currently closed. We've got a large and very active, under normal circumstances, very busy coffee bar. And then we've got the fitness center. So all of those areas are closed right now. The fitness center has really come forth with virtual live fitness classes and several videos that you can get online, and they have put out several programs that you can participate in, and so they've gotten a lot of people involved that way, and they do lunch and learns, and they do nutrition classes and exercise classes. As far as the coffee bar, that was all self-serve, and it was extremely busy and extremely popular. So it's something that I'm sure people are going to want to get back to, but it just does not work right now. So one of the things that we're looking at is setting it up somehow so that it can be in a served environment. That obviously increases headcount because of the popularity of it, but it's something that we're looking at. And then the cafe, one of the biggest areas was the salad bar, which I think those are gone.
Yes.
For the foreseeable future. Yeah. But we will get to a point where we can reopen the cafeteria. It'll be takeout. We also have, you can call ahead or go online and order and just pick it up. So I think people will rely on that. And then we have, and I'm sure several companies use this, but we have the Foodsby service. So you can, there's certain restaurants that offer service each day, and you can go in the morning and order it, and it's delivered to your lobby. So we have that, and I think that service will ramp up a lot. But those are the biggest areas. And then we're looking at the break rooms. They remain open, but they have taken a lot of the condiments out, and we're looking at the touch, going in and changing out coffee pots and the tea service, and so that they're touchless. And we're doing, looking at all the options to make those available to people so that they at least have that amenity that we retain.
Automation is going to really be at the forefront, which is why I mentioned the OpEx up.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Everything. We're looking right now, we've changed all our soap dispensers to be fully automated. We're looking at full automation of everything in our pantries. There's a pantry on each workplace floor, and that's going to be a really big deal.
We do have Avenue C, that same idea in some of our buildings. And I think those will be, yeah, those, you will see more and more of those.
Mhm.
Yeah, we were hearing from one of our clients, they have a large kind of cafeteria. They offer a kind of a free incentivized meal program each day to their employees. And they're looking at even having the cafeteria still open, but now employees can actually have that food delivered to their workstation so that they're avoiding that traffic going down to the cafeteria for lunches and whatnot. So interesting. I'm wondering from Kitty, your perspective, are you hearing anything different or unique in terms of what our clients are telling us in regards to those changes or those temporary changes being made?
I don't
Are
see.
you with us? I'm not seeing her. All right. Well, maybe what we'll do is I can
I
jump.
think Kitty just got back on.
Did she get back on? Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Well, maybe what I
Thank
can
you
talk
about that. Sorry.
Oh, okay, good. I was ready to
I
jump
am
in there,
sorry
Kitty.
about that. Yeah. No. Yes, if we get to the next screen, I'll cover that. I'm so sorry about that. We have a
You're
little
fine.
connection lag on my side. And so I want to talk to everyone about the physical things of the near, right? We've talked about the now, how we need to retrofit and look for opportunities to kind of do the CDC guidelines. But in the near future, what we're working on is adding mobility, right? It's just exactly what Leslie was saying and Krista was saying. The technology and work settings that different users are looking for. If the ones that are coming in the office, obviously, we've got protocols for them on what to do, but you also have to start looking at protocols for what to do working at home. Leslie had mentioned that for an HR, people are looking for the similar ergonomics that they had at the office. So do you increase budget to let people bring their office chair home, or certain things? You obviously don't want furniture to start disappearing into people's homes because it would be so hard to get that back for yourself later on. But it is making accommodations for people to be able to work at home better too. That is something I don't think we can ignore. That is something we have to look at moving forward. So there's a lot of attention that you need to start looking at for that. That's not just now. The flexible furniture and reconfiguring work settings, that is also very important because we don't know how people feel when they come back. It can't be the same cube that they were before. We've heard from some people that they're worried about coming back for benching. And I did see one of the questions out there, you know, how high are people making screens to feel comfortable, right? So we had lowered a lot of workstations in the last few years to open up daylight to everyone, and people can see each other, collaborate better. We hate those old IBM walls that we used to have that were like 60 inches high. But it's about I don't want to prescribe it, but I feel like a lot of the screens that are offered for people that the furniture groups are doing right now are still at a 48-inch level. They're add-on, 12 inches add-on to, you know, open work environments. But also, besides just your workstation and benching, you have to do the other kind of rooms that people are comfortable collaborating in. So that maybe the huddle rooms are no longer fully closed. You may have to leave a door open so people feel like they're getting fresh air coming in. So there's a new thing with that about acoustics and how to define walls that you like. The next thing is demountable walls. Like I said, opening rooms and demountable walls are something to invest in and take a look at. You can reconfigure a little quicker, but they also have some solutions to really trying to open up space a lot more than traditional 3-foot doors. The integration of remote work settings, this is a very important thing to think about. You're not inviting a 1-to-1 ratio anymore. So if you have one full-time employee, you were looking at real estate for one full-time employee to come into work. Maybe the ratios have to change now, and HR groups may want to think about with leadership how to change that. Do you have to have a 1-to-1 ratio for full-time employee? If some employees work at home, does that mean that when they come in, it's a shared work area, or is it a work cafe where they can kind of do some touchdown work? That's, you know, using cafe spaces. That's one of the thoughts. Can you use some cafe spaces and make it a work cafe So that's not exactly a full workstation that they have to do heads down work. Those are just some things to think about for architecture coming through.
Thank you. So if we head to the next slide, you know, we're kind of thinking future, forward thinking. And I want to just maybe take 5 minutes on this topic, because do any of us really have the full answer? Not yet, but I think the key to all of this is flexibility. And I'm seeing a lot of questions coming through, so I want to make sure we save some time at the end here, about 15 minutes for questions. So just one quick question to the three of you. What is your hypothesis about the future of office design? And Krista, go.
Gotcha. So there's a ton of prognostication. Everybody is playing fortune teller. I think flexible work environments are going to be the new norm. I think space distribution ratios, so individual versus community versus group, are going to shift. I think that, and this could go either way, I think real estate reductions to counter the OpEx spend for these comfort measures and clear comms and wayfinding and signage may become something that we're going to be tasked to look at. Convertibility of space. Like Kitty mentioned, conference rooms may not be conference rooms. Phone rooms may be where somebody works for the day. And I think a workspace reservation system for contact tracing capabilities and being clear to where people go in every day. And I think they can become robust with QR codes. I think there's some nice software out there. Those types of things, I think, are where we're headed.
How about you, Leslie?
I agree with Krista on this. I think as far as our real estate, I think our portfolios need to be very nimble. I think that we need to look at, and you know, some of the thought that Charter is having is that we need to look at shorter term leases with renewals so that we can easily address growth if it happens. We need to take on some extra space. We have a huge contingent of contractors, and it does go up and down. And so I think, again, we need to just keep our portfolio nimble so that we can address those, you know, those ups and downs with the contractor headcount. But we really need to be able to address the concerns of the employees. I think we need to look at being very aware of the concerns that the employees are having and be able to address the needs and concerns of the employees within the workspaces. I think the reservation system is huge for the contact tracing. But I really think we just need to be very flexible moving forward and very nimble with our portfolio so that we can address headcount growth or reductions as they come about.
Sure. How about you, Kitty? Any final thoughts or ideas?
I have some thoughts. If you have one more slide for me here, if you don't mind switching to that. Yeah, so looking at afar, I think the key that we talked about for now was a retrofit plot, and the near we talked about reconfiguring. And now the last thing in the far scenario, what I'm talking about is we need to talk about reinvention, right? We're reinventing the ways we work. We're reinventing different ways. There's a mindset for a new way of working, like what our other guests have said. There will be new rituals and protocols about illness protocols, amenities protocols, and sanitation. Sanitation you probably have in place already, but you know, how do you create a room for people who think they're sick so you don't send them home right away, right? Nobody likes that. It's not a shaming, but it you know, people are worried about other people being sick, but you know, if you're home already to be sick, they don't want you don't want people to think that you're, you know, if it's just a minor sore throat or something like that, is it something you power through, or is it something you need to go home right away? But there's also a wellness emphasis, and we talked about Charter closing in the fitness center, and we have other clients that have fitness centers, and that is a tricky one. Fitness is because you're directly sweating and doing that on top. But as far as food service, we have had other clients talk about prepackaged food and using a turbo chef. So it is a one sole source that prepare all the food ahead of time and get that together. And then joining running clubs, you know, can you go outside more? That's very important now. Go outside, do a meditation group in some of the areas, and then a lot more rooms for flexibility and technology. That will be another thing to look at. Technology is going to be a huge part of how people work, and how we define those rooms may not be the traditional, you know, PowerPoint anymore, or there may be something more than Zoom that we need to look at, and that's something to think about too.
Awesome. Thanks, Kitty. So I guess I want to open it up to questions. And I think someone from C2HR is going to moderate the questions that are in the chat feature here.
I will. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your insight and your information. And you have quite a few questions. So I'm going to start reading them, and then I'll let you all decide who takes what on. So one moment. Okay. And I think you've answered some of these in pieces, but you know, there's more to each question. So regarding employees returning to work, how are you managing break room access for employees? Are they closing them off completely? If so, where are employees storing their food?
I can take something on that one about break rooms. We're still working on a couple projects with existing clients, and then we're still trying to build some other ones. And we're being asked to look at a lot of things that are hands-free and touch-free. So the storage of the food is one thing. That is a policy that each company has to determine. But as far as what to do with appliances and touch-free faucets, we are getting requests to look at hands-free soap dispensing, hands-free faucets. There is a film, there are a couple manufacturers that make an antimicrobial film that you can put on appliances and handles. They only have about a 90-day shelf life, and you know, with that, we don't know how many people are touching that, so there's a maintenance to that. But there are films that our clients are looking and putting on top of their appliances, so that the microwave touchpads can be antimicrobial, and the door handles for the refrigerators can be antimicrobial. But the food inside the fridge, that's a new thing that no one has really figured out yet, and that depends on each company, I guess, if that helps answer the question.
And I would say at EUA right now, being a part of kind of building our roadmap to return, we are temporarily closing all of our break room kind of work cafe areas, with the exception of the sinks, so people can wash their hands. But we kind of have a policy of no trace left behind, or leave no trace. So basically, if you bring your food in, you got to take it out. You got to take all your garbage out. You can't use the plates here. That kind of thing. And again, that's just a temporary near-term kind of solution to help with our cleaning protocols.
Okay, well, I'm going to go on to the next question. Thank you for that information. Can you share more about the welcome packets for those employees re-entering an office, and who administers the thermal temps for those who are requiring this step prior to entering?
I can speak to that. I'll start with thermal imaging. Right now, it's our security team. But we are looking at third party to do that administration. I think that there are certified medical third party companies out there right now that we're looking into. It's expensive, but we feel that a third party might be best. With respect to the welcome packets for the employees coming in, that is our supply chain and procurement team, and they're looking at including hand sanitizer, dry erase markers, things that you would typically share if you were writing on a whiteboard, but now you'll have your own. Masks. Masks, by the way, are required. I have to wear a mask. Unless I'm in my office, I have to wear a mask the whole time I'm in the building, unless I'm in my office. So there you go. And they're not that comfortable. They're not, I haven't found the perfect mask yet. It's very claustrophobic for me. But that is something that has to happen if you are going to be in the office. You have to have a mask on.
Right, and I think that actually answers one of our other questions that we had. Here's another question just about teams. Some functions such as sales thrive or excel in a competitive environment where agents or account executives step up their game in the presence of their peers. Working remotely has limited that competitive spirit akin to running alone versus running against others. Do you have any insight on bringing back sales departments to fuel or increase performance, or the other ways to engage that in a virtual way if we can't bring everybody back to the office?
I can maybe take a little bit of that. I would say on the business development front here at UA, we've taken a lot more time to use this time to get to know one another differently. So it's building that camaraderie amongst the salespeople. Every Monday we have a reporting meeting that we have. We used to only have that once a month, and now we're having it weekly. And at the beginning of that meeting, we spend 15 minutes. And I know it sounds like a lot, but it's 15 minutes. Someone gets to pick the theme of the meeting, and then we kind of do a round robin of what that theme means to them. So last week we had, what's your theme song or mantra song for this time at home? And then Megan, who's our marketing leader, she put together basically like a mix of songs for all of us to listen to. So I would say it's building that camaraderie right now. And honestly, like being very thoughtful about the sale process with our clients, and that everybody's kind of in this area of flux. So how can we be there? What do they need? How can we best support them? That's how we're approaching it right now.
Does anyone have any other ideas or suggestions? And I think someone also put up as one of the suggestions in the chat box, virtual leaderboards are a possible solution as well. So thank you for sharing your insight, Shannon.
I could say that works for my son right now with his homework. Whenever his name dials up to the top, he's in it for the next round of homework. So.
We have another question regarding fresh air. Is anyone considering changes to HVAC systems to bring in more fresh air or to reduce air exchange between offices?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was just going to say some of the research that has been done talks about the utilization of UVC light, which is great. This is obviously a long-term look at what the possibilities are to changes to things like the HVAC systems, but to make it really effective, you've got to look at incorporating it into the air handling units. Again, we're looking at longer term and an expensive solution, but it is something that we need to look at because it addresses the sanitizing and the cleanliness of the air at its source. So it is something that's the research is out there. We've started to look at, but we're just at the very beginning of that.
And I was going to say that depending on the building you're in, it is going to be interesting because older buildings obviously may still have operable windows. And that's what you're looking for is a fresh air exchange, right? And so
Right.
newer buildings, they're building newer buildings now that have individual floor HVAC that's handled per floor. And those in New York places and high rises, those come at a premium right now because you're able to control just your own air for your group. That's not something that's for everyone, but everybody's HVAC system, you actually should go back to your mechanical engineer and talk about, there's a certain amount of fresh air exchange that needs to happen for code to make the air come in. And that may be a valve or something that we need to look at for the setting to see if we can get more fresh air exchange in. I'm not an expert on that, but I know that we have been working on that with some of our engineers and to see how to, and it's almost it's a renovation that we have to do, right? There's more VAV boxes that you can add in, but you need to look at this capacity that you have, but just getting more fresh air exchanges and localizing that, like Leslie said, is what's important to the users.
Thank you. And I think there's one more. I'm just trying to get that one. And I know, Krista, you had talked about masks being required at Comcast. Is that also true, Leslie? And for Charter and Heather, is that true where you're at now that everyone is wearing masks? Or is it certain
Yes.
places or if you're in your office?
Yes, charter requires a mask anywhere in the building. And even if you're at your desk and there are other people nearby, they are requiring them at your desk. If you're in an office, obviously you can take it off unless you've got someone coming in, but they are requiring them right now.
Yeah, we're requiring them in all of our common spaces, but we can take them off at the desk. That being said, we also have a dispersed plan set up. So right now there's actually somebody else on the floor here with me, but they're actually probably more like 12 feet away. So that's how we're handling it here. And we are providing them at UA, but if those individuals have them, we're also asking to bring your own in, just again, due to the limited supplies that we have. So, and then once we reintroduce visitors back into our office locations, we have a lot of client meetings that happen at our office. We're probably going to ask them to follow the same kind of protocols, just again, to keep everybody safe. So.
And Katie, I know you talked about the cubicle walls, and height. Is there any other information that people need to know as they're looking at their spaces?
Yeah, there are a lot of furniture companies out there that I've seen several presentations recently, and the cubicle heights is one thing, and that I'm only saying that just because I feel like we do work with Comcast, we do work with Charter, that a bulk of people are in open offices because we've done this consolidation where we've taken people out of offices and put them in open environment. So there are the open office environment is a lot more of a concern. So it's the cubicles. There are other storage units that I've seen people do that give people kind of a personalization space where it's a storage tower, but it pulls out and it kind of gives the barrier between the person sitting next to them and the cubicle that they're in right now. Those are becoming, I'm getting a lot of questions about trying to price those right now, just because that is kind of a bigger physical barrier than just screens. No one can kick those over, but that gives a lot of personalization of space, and also that kind of 48-inch barrier that people are looking at. And the barriers that we're talking about are not just the talking to people across from you, because I know a lot of the benching environments are the person right in front of you, but it's also the sides. And some people are looking at what to do behind them so that people aren't walking by behind them and accidentally sneezing on them. So that back screen is another one to look at, and those are freestanding ones or ceiling suspended. We've seen some felt panels that you can suspend from the ceiling to kind of make that divider. Those are the things that we've been seeing.
I would also add, we kind of looked at the restroom doors, how can we get those to swing out, and maybe for like a shorter term, you have less of a budget, there are mechanisms that you can put on the floor to help open that door so you're not touching it. But for more of a longer term solution, is there an opportunity to maybe re-swing those doors? Places like that are things that we're looking at as well.
Yeah, Krista mentioned automation. That's a huge switch. Everybody needs to be hands-free and automation. I do have to make, and I don't make any money doing this, but there is a quick thing called the step-in pole. They use it a lot in Asia. It's a little $30 device that they like screw into the bottom of the doors, and it doesn't help with closers because you have to adjust the weight of your closer and how quickly the doors close, but you basically step on it and pull it open with your foot.
Kitty, we're piloting those right now in our headquarters building right now.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, there's a company called Terrain around here that we use. So.
Well, I want to, as we're getting close to the end of the hour, I want to really thank all of you, Krista, Heather, Leslie, and Kitty, for being a part of today's call and sharing all the information on what you are doing as we all navigate this journey together. And I want to thank our C2HR community for being a part of this call. We do have calls, more webinars coming up in the future, so please do take a look. I know there was questions about this particular slide deck and program. It will be sent to you later today, and then the recording will be shared with our membership in the coming weeks. And finally, I want to thank Charter Communications and the Cable Center for their support that are making these webinars possible. Thank you, everyone, and please stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. Bye.